Hi everyone, I'm Katie, founder of Flexible Working People. Hope you all had a lovely Easter weekend, and some of you might be on school holidays this week. But I'm really excited to be coming in tonight to have a session that's really quite different to some of the sessions that we normally do. But I think it's really important because I think that a lot of what we talk about is about finding jobs and giving you tips and strategies around that. Actually, tonight's session is all around our emotional well-being, which is kind of even more important because we don't feel strong and, kind of able to perform, then that can affect everything in our lives. And how we show up and perform at work is kind of a reflection of how we're feeling. So I'm really thrilled to be joined tonight by Ali Olins. Hi, Ali.
Hi, it's so lovely to be here. Thank you, Katie. I'm very excited.
No, I'm really excited to have you because I think that we've talked about this. I've known Ali for a long time and we've talked about, she's a life coach, but I've been following her content and I've known her for many years. Ali works with individuals and corporates, don't you? And you kind of get really under the surface to help people feel more empowered, to get better balance in their life. Specifically, you help people with confidence and anxiety, to get people to a point where they feel like they can do their job and they can like break out of some of these kind of stressful situations and kind of where life takes us and getting out of your head. So I thought it was really good to bring Ali in because she's also got a career, she's got a background, a corporate background. Ali was actually in recruitment for years and ran a really large successful agency before she had kids. So Ali really understands what it is to have a career, corporate career, and kind of to balance and juggle those balls. So she brings like lots of knowledge and insights to the table tonight. So I can see quite a lot of you joining. So I'm really happy to see that. And what we're going to talk about tonight is kind of stress, but more than stress. It's like the difference between kind of feeling stressed and then burnout. And I think these are like terms that we throw around. And I think it'll be interesting to hear Ali talk tonight about what actually is stress, what is burnout, what do they mean? But more importantly, what we're going to talk about is what we can actually do about it. Because I feel like in our everyday lives, we'll go, I'm so stressed. But like, actually, what can we do to help ourselves? Because we can't fire on all cylinders if we're feeling that stressed. And when it gets too far and it tips the balance and you're just exhausted and you just feel like you can't cope and do your job and do life. So that's what we're talking about tonight. Say hi in the comments if you are watching live, and if you're watching on replay, type in replay so that we know you're watching. And also, like, I hope you've got a glass of wine or a cup of tea. We want this to be really informal and really interactive. So if you've got any questions or you're feeling a certain way, we've got a couple of people saying hello, then pop them in the chat box. No one else can see them, but we'll be able to see them, and maybe Ali can answer them at the end. All right, so I'm going to stop talking and hand over, but just wanted to start, Ali, by saying, like, obviously this is what you do. You're a life coach.
Yes.
Why is this such an important topic? I know it's something that you're really passionate about. Like, why is our emotional well-being so important, and why is this something that you focus on?
I think that things have changed so much now that we are looking online. So many of us are scrolling online, and we end up, whatever age we are, it could be, our younger kids, our older kids, women our age, we're always looking what everyone else is doing. And we end up really comparing ourselves a lot of the time. So even though we are good enough and we do work hard, and we are running a home potentially, or, raising a family, and we are doing enough, there's this constant comparison. And so you're always looking what everyone else is doing and thinking, I don't do that. Am I enough? Am I good enough? And the thoughts just don't stop, and the thoughts keep on coming. And I think that this is where the seed gets planted, is what I would say.
Okay. And when you're talking to your clients about this, what are they telling you?
I feel like at the beginning of the journey, when we start talking, when we start on the life coaching journey, a lot of the things that I hear my clients saying to me are a mixture of, I could achieve more. I can handle it all on my own. I have to be perfect. Everything should be perfect. Christmas, Easter, everything that we see, everything, they have to look perfect, be perfect. I have to look perfect, everything. I don't want to ask for help because I don't want to appear weak is a big one. I will put everyone else first, which is what we all do. I'll be fine. I'll sort myself out at a later time, and I'll just make sure everyone else is happy, and I'll just go to the back of the queue. And
Do you
these are
think
the
people
things.
people actively say that, or do you think that that's actually how they're behaving, but that's not, so inwardly they're going, I can't cope, I can't deal with this, but outwardly they're going, but I have to keep going, I have to keep going.
Yes. And that is one of the problems. That is one of the problems where they say, I don't want to ask for help because I don't want to look weak. So I think internally they know that they are struggling. And I suppose the reason that you come to a life coach is you get to a junction and you think, I can't carry on like this. You know, I can't keep doing this. So to everyone else, it's a bit like the duck or whatever it is, you know, swimming in the water or the iceberg, you know, you just see the bit gliding along the top because that's the bit that you want everyone to see. But furiously, you're paddling underneath, trying to keep up, you know, trying to be the person that everyone expects you to be. And it just becomes absolutely exhausting. And because we're subjected to so many images and so much information online day and night, and we ask for it almost because we don't stop the scroll, it's a constant battle in our heads. And I think that's when people reach a point of, I can't do this anymore. I don't know. I know something has to give. I don't know what it is, but something has to give. And I think you get to a place where for your own well-being, something has to be done.
So we talk about stress, and I think that, I mean, there's not a day that goes past that I probably don't say, I feel so stressed.
Yeah.
And tonight is about feeling stressed, but also kind of when that gets too far, and then what are the boundaries, and kind of when does that become overload. So talk to us about what stress is, and then maybe, right, what is burnout? What does that look like? And what are the differences between the two?
Absolutely. And you know what? They are clearly very different. And the way that I would describe stress, let's just say, for an example, you've got a really important meeting coming up. And it's completely natural and normal to maybe overthinking a bit more about that particular meeting because it's important to you. You may get butterflies in your tummy, or you may wake up in the night and you're thinking about it, these sorts of things, because it means a lot to you. But once that meeting is over, all those feelings should pass. Okay. So the overthinking, the butterflies in the tummy, you get a little lurch in your stomach when you think about it. When that event is over, that should all pass. Burnout, when you feel burnt out and overwhelmed, is quite different because it's not one particular thing that you're thinking about. Everything is a bit of a blur in your head. And it's a bit like a grey cloud looming over you that's just increasing and increasing, and nothing you can do can seem to control it. It doesn't matter if it's the weekend, you're not excited. It doesn't matter if you're going on holiday, that feeling is still there. You can't get rid of that feeling. It just won't go away. And that's where you can really identify the difference between normal and, somewhat healthy, a little bit stress, because let's be honest, we can't be unrealistic. We live in a really fast-paced world. You are always going to have some stress, but stress and burnout are two very different things. So that's how.
So let's just break it down, because I think that burnout's a big word, and burnout, it's so much more than stress. So what are the symptoms might you feel if you're feeling burnt out?
With burnout, I always put them into 3 different categories. Okay. So we can have physical, we have psychological, and we'll have behavioral. Okay. So we'll start with the physical. Physical can be things like you're sick more often. You get that headache, as we spoke before, that stressy headache, it's like squeezing your head. You start to get stomach issues, digestion issues. Things are just not quite the same down there. Something doesn't feel right. You're absolutely exhausted, but you are so restless. You go to bed exhausted, unable to sleep. You just can't sleep. The thoughts, they just don't stop, cannot switch off. And you randomly get these like heart palpitations, which are probably things you didn't have before, because your subconscious is so powerful that quite often it knows more going on than you are aware of. Okay.
Yeah.
So those are the physical. Then you get the psychological. And these can be things like panic attacks that you never used to have. Okay. Loss of enjoyment, as we discussed, from things that you used to love. You don't know where to get the joy from anymore, and which is a really awful and scary feeling, because it's quite overwhelming. Like, what do I love anymore? What, you know, who am I? You feel a bit hopeless and helpless, and you know when you get that little angry feeling in the pit of your stomach and it just rises and rises and it burns, you get more of that. That's how you start to feel these feelings of anger and irritable, and you just feel so frustrated. Okay, so those are more the psychological. And then we go on to behavioral. And the behavioral become really apparent when you're in the workplace more than anything else, if you are working. And this looks like drop in productivity. Okay, so you might have been a real busy bee before, and now you just kind of, you've lost your mojo a little bit. You may always have been going into work, never miss a day. Now the thought of just staying in bed or just being at home, not having to see anyone, is increasingly like that's what you're looking for. Okay, so you've got increased absenteeism, bit of a poor team player. Whereas before you'd be like, oh, I'll help you, I'll do this. You know, you're happy to give your input all the time.
Is it like you're disengaging, like somewhat?
It's like a smoke screen a little bit, you know, you almost feel quite separate. And isolating yourself is quite a big thing at work. When you are starting to feel that burnout, you don't really want to be with the others as much as you used to. You almost don't want them to peep in to see what's going on. You know, you don't want anyone to see in. So maybe you used to have lunch or a sandwich or something at lunchtime with the friend. You won't want to do that. Maybe people would go out for drinks after work. You're finding that's definitely not what you want.
It's weird, because as you're talking, I'm going, a lot of the stuff that you're saying is burnout, but there's like a bit of an overlap there with depression. Like sometimes it might be hard to tell the two.
Yeah, they can. I mean, they can mix over. I think that with depression, sometimes you might be a lot more emotional, might be a lot more tears, that kind of thing. I feel like with burnout at work, it is, you can kind of tell slightly, but when we go into a little detail a bit more later, it might become clearer how you can tell the difference.
All right, so we've talked about the physical, psychological, behavioural. Is there anything? Sorry, I think I just interrupted you, but
I was only going to say the only other behavioural thing that you really do need to look out for, which is really important, is when things are getting quite serious, there are people that turn to drugs and alcohol, and that is because they need that space away from their head. They want to disconnect from their brain. So by drinking, taking drugs, perhaps, even though obviously we know it's not the answer, people feel like it'll give them that respite that they're looking for.
They're just looking for an hour, like a switch off from somewhere.
Exactly. It's because you get to a point of desperation, and that's what you turn to. And even though we all know it's never the answer, it's a quick fix. It's a quick dopamine fix. That's what you're looking for.
So one of the listeners has said all of these things overlaid with someone who said overlaid with hormones. My cycle plays havoc with my motivation and also my anxiety. So it's like lots of things at play when you're feeling like disengaged, and everything else that's going on in your body is cannot help. So I think
that's tough. That's really, because you know it's really hard. You know, as I said before, our lives are so busy and so fast paced, and so much is expected of us. And that's when we're running on all cylinders. Throw in your hormones being out of whack, or you know, you're getting to a certain age, or you know, you don't want to, you know. It's really hard to find the motivation and find all these things. It's like you have to be a machine. And that is exactly the reason why it is imperative to say, hey, you know what? Something is not right and I need a bit of help. And this is where I'm struggling, because this is the problem, particularly for us women. You know, when we do get peripausal and menopausal, so much is expected of us, and our work can be difficult. Life in general can be stressful. And it's so important to say, I'm not weak for asking for help. Actually, I'm really strong. And I always think that of women who put their hand up and say, okay, enough. Okay, I'm strong enough and I am confident enough in myself to admit that I cannot do everything. And for me
True.
to do things well,
It
yeah,
takes more strength somehow to like say enough and not, I'm just going to carry on delivering and doing because I can't. And actually, it's much stronger to say and set boundaries. And I know that you're going to talk about that in a
we're
minute,
going to
but
talk about that. But absolutely, because you know what I feel? I feel like when you don't admit that something needs to give, do you know who suffers? Everyone around you as well as you. If you have
yeah,
children or your partner, husband, wife, whatever, you end up ultimately taking it out on them because you're not yourself. You are overwhelmed, you're burnt out, you're exhausted, and you're stressed. And that doesn't go to your boots. That has to go somewhere. So by admitting that you need help, you're not just helping yourself, you're helping everyone around you who loves you, who tries to keep you going. But it's really tough sometimes. So I never understand why there's any shame, because there is only so much that we can all do well. We can all do
yeah,
loads not that great, but to do it well and the standard that we want, sometimes it's like, okay, something's got to give.
yeah.
And
So Matt's
that's
just said, Matt has just said that's true of men too. And I
yeah.
think we shouldn't focus on just
Mm.
women. Obviously, Matt's listening, but it can be difficult to speak up, especially, I think it's especially hard for men.
Yes.
Somehow it is
Yes.
easier for women to say that they're feeling like this. I think it's even harder for men. And also, he was saying it, especially if you're in a senior role, it can be quite hard to admit
Yeah.
that you're struggling because no one wants to admit that they're struggling,
I know. And
particularly if
that's,
you're senior and there's an expectation on you.
yeah, and that's what is so crazy. And I always think that, because when I am coaching more senior people, I always want to say, if you go into a boardroom, every single one of those people has got their struggles. It doesn't matter if they admit it or you don't admit it. Every single one of them do, because it doesn't matter how senior you get, you don't suddenly get given superpowers. That's not how it works. There's more stress and more stress. Male suicide, the reason why male suicide is, becoming more and more common is because men have this feeling that they can't admit a weakness, but it's not. It's a strength. It's a strength to say, I need some help. Because if you don't admit that and you do carry on going down that path, you don't know where that's going to end for your mental health. So why would that be stronger?
100%
And that's a
agree with
really
you.
big message that I want to give, particularly men out there. I hear what they're saying because I feel like men say, a lot of the women with perimenopause and menopause, everyone's very understanding, etc. But what about
Yeah.
us guys? But it's up to you have to change your way of thinking, because nothing changes if nothing changes, and if you see it as a weakness, you're never going to admit it. And it is scary where it can end up. And ultimately, who's judging you?
Well, I think we
I
are
would
our
say.
own worst judge. And that's the problem. Actually,
Exactly.
everyone genuinely wants to help. I think if you
Of
reach
course.
out, people genuinely do want to help. I think that people are so worried about asking for help, and actually
Absolutely.
putting yourself out there and being vulnerable is so incredible. And what it brings back is also so incredible because you realize that, as you said, we are all human. No one has superpowers. It doesn't matter what level you get. In fact, it
Right.
gets harder as you get more senior in a way because you feel like even less
Absolutely.
like you want to be exposed.
And I think that when sometimes when people do admit that they have a weakness and that, they are struggling, you put a mirror up to other people and it makes them feel a little bit uncomfortable because actually they kind of wish they could do that. And you're saying the things that they feel as well.
But it
There is
also
no
breaks
one.
down barriers and means that other people can admit to problems too. And then you find a whole new honesty in that kind of
Exactly.
interaction where we aren't all
Absolutely.
perfect. It's like in COVID
Yeah.
when everyone suddenly took the covers off and went, okay, this is my real life. It's like actually being vulnerable, so powerful.
Absolutely. And there is no shame in it. And I have clients that literally hand over their mental health to me. So I will coach all of the staff because they understand, and these are quite forward thinking companies, but they understand that everyone has their thoughts in their head. Every single person, it doesn't matter how senior, you have thoughts that go round and round your head. It doesn't make you weak. Maybe you don't always want to talk about it, someone who directly works in the workplace. So they would outsource it to me, knowing everything's private. And it's so fascinating because there is, as more and more people sign up to do the coaching, it makes other people feel more comfortable that they can and they won't be judged. I feel like we're entering into a new era now where it is okay to open up about how you feel about your mental health, and it is okay to ask for help. And eventually people will start seeing it as a stress. And I feel like that's where a strength, sorry. And I feel like for men, that is where things will really change for them. Because, you know, and I do understand, I think, was it Matt? And I don't want to leave women out. And I do, listen, I'm a life coach, so I have all sorts of clients, so I hear it. And it's not a weakness. You're a strong person.
So let's talk about the workplace. I think this is where like more burnout comes from.
Yeah.
And I think that the people listening will probably feel that the burnout comes from kind of what they need to deliver and, you know, the constant pressure of balance in their lives. What are the triggers for burnout in the workplace that people might not be aware of?
Okay, so there's a few different things to look out for. Number one, do you have time to do what is important? Okay, because it's all very well being given a huge workload, but do you know, are the expectations real? Do you have time to do what is expected of you? And do you have a control in discussions about which affect your work? You know, are you just dumped the work in your inbox? Does anyone come over? Does anyone talk to you? Does anyone talk it through with you? How are you getting on? You know, how are your timelines? How are your deadlines? You know, treating you with an element of respect, that you're not a robot, that you are a person. So those things are really important, you know, your input. Do you feel rewarded? Do you feel appreciated? Do you feel like, you know, we have to be realistic, you know, yes, quite often we do have to work hard, but when you're rewarded and you feel appreciated, it kind of, you know, that's where the balance is. But there's nothing worse when you feel like it takes over so much of your life, but actually you feel you just do not get rewarded properly for what you do, for the amount that you're giving. You don't feel like you get enough back. Opportunities at work. How are they decided? Is it purely on what they give you and how quickly you're able to get it back? Or do they look at everything? Do they look at if you're a team player, ideas that you come up with, you know, just the character you are in the office? There's so many different parts to you when you're an employee. So what exactly do they look at? Because when it's just they give you the work, you give it back, they kind of dehumanize you. You just don't feel like a person. You know, you want to be spoken to, you want to be involved, you want to have a conversation. Is there a support group at work that you can talk to? You know, obviously anonymously, that is, you know, if you work for a large organization, there may well be, you know, like a union, that type of thing that you can go to and kind of not so much air your grievances, but a problem shared is a problem halved. And they often will have some advice for you. But I think a really big one is, do your values align with the company? Because quite often companies evolve from when you first started with them. Sometimes they grow, they get taken over, you know, and you sometimes get to a place where you think, oh, this place is not the place that I used to work at. This is not what I signed up for. You know, when I first signed up, you know, people would talk to me, or, you know, it'd be a different phone
Culture's
call,
changed, it's evolved, and it's grown. It's just
yeah.
doesn't
And
fit
is this
your
me?
values
Is it,
anymore.
yeah. Is this me anymore? Do I love it? You know, and I think those are really important points to look out for, I would say, when you're thinking about what, you know, what the little, you know, what could be causing you to feel like this. And I know there's a lot there to think about, but quite often it will come under one of those categories.
It's true. If you don't feel appreciated and you're constantly being asked to deliver and you're not engaged, you're not involved in conversations and your values don't align, like you can just keep delivering and delivering and delivering. But in the end, it's like actually this environment isn't doing me any good. Like it's not good for my mental health. Like it's not right for me. And I think we forget to question that because we blame ourselves all the time. It's like, well, what's my role in this? But there's all these other factors going on. And what you're saying is like you can't have an effect on everything, but you can like maybe take a step back. And I think that's the next part of this, which is like, what can we actually do about it? So if you are feeling all of this and you feel like you are out of control and things are spiraling a bit, what do you suggest to your clients or to anyone listening tonight to do? What can they proactively do?
Okay, so I think something that you can do straight away, and this is really quite hard to do. I know that it's not the easiest thing to do, But it's really important to be able to take a complete step back. I don't mean don't go into work. I mean mentally to take a step back and kind of look into your life as if you're an outsider and look into what is expected of you every single day. So it could include like busy mornings if you have a family, what's expected of you in the workday, what's expected of you in the evenings, all that kind of thing. And you have got to look at it subjectively because you need to try and find out what the bad weed is. That is what is really important. Okay. So you have to be able to look at it as an outsider. What is going on in my life? And if I was an outsider looking in at my life, where would be the obvious place, the obvious areas where I am going to be struggling? And it can be really hard to do that, but it's imperative. It's imperative that you look at your life as an outsider so that you can start seeing where perhaps that bad weed is, that bad root is, because the only way we can change it is to try and pull that out. So that's one really important thing that we could do straight away. Okay, is to start thinking about it and kind of detaching ourselves almost from our everyday life, looking at it as if you were a stranger. So that's one really big thing. A second thing that you can do straight away that will really help is small chunking. And by that, I mean, when we feel like we've got these really large tasks in front of us, it can feel so overwhelming because you think, I have just got so much to do here and I can't think about it, you know, and you feel a bit powerless and you feel a bit overwhelmed. So I often say to people, small chunk things. Get whatever the large thing is, look at all your deadlines. Your deadlines won't all be the same. There will be some things that are more important than others. And out of those more important things, you need to break those down into smaller bits. And by doing that, you take away some of the overwhelm and you give yourself back some power. Because that is what's so important, is to feel like you're giving yourself back some power. Because I feel like we often feel so overwhelmed and we just feel powerless because there's just too much going on. And so it's very important to give yourself back some power. So try and make things bite-sized, because then you also feel like you've achieved something. Right, okay, I've done that bit. Now I'll move on to the next bit. And it just creates a different feeling. Okay, you feel like you've achieved something, you're given back some power, move on to the next bit. And thirdly, and this is such a big one, and you know, we could do a whole live on it, but you know, it's boundaries. And not setting your boundaries it's crucial. It's absolutely crucial to have your boundaries, and you need to have your non-negotiable boundaries. And I always say to my clients, for strict non-negotiable boundaries, think of them as one on each corner of you, like your bodyguards. They are strict non-negotiable boundaries that no one can cross over, and that will give you the harmony and the peace and the life that you know that you are able to lead. Some boundaries obviously have to be slightly negotiable. But in order to have a personal life, a private life, a family life, and a work life, you're just constantly going to be feeling angry, because if you haven't set out your boundaries and things are constantly being asked of you, you feel like you're the difficult one because you're always saying no and you're always adding resistance.
So Ali, give us an example, or give us some examples of some hard boundaries that you tell your clients to put in place.
Yeah. So let's say you're working and you know you have to pick your child up at a certain time. That is a non-negotiable. So you've already, you would tell them at the beginning, there is no negotiation with that. I have to leave work at a certain time because I have to be there to pick my child up from work. Okay. That's one big thing. Taking work calls. You know, are you happy to take work calls at 8:30 at night? If you are, great. Or is there 1 hour in the evening that you are happy to take work calls? Then you have to say it. You know, you have to lay out what your boundaries are, what is good for you and what is not good for you, and what is going to ultimately give you a life and to give you downtime, because no one is a robot. We weren't meant to be like that. We have to have some downtime. We have to, in order to work well and in order to be productive.
It's interesting because for me, sometimes the boundaries make me feel more stressed.
Yes.
So I don't know what other people think. Be interesting to hear in the comments. But I find that when I put boundaries in place, it makes me more stressed, because then, like, I'm almost like thinking, well, I've said that I'm not doing that, but then the work piles up and I need to do it. And so then that makes me even more stressed. And so, or what will people think of me if I put boundaries in place? Like, I know that I have to deliver this, so I'm not really in a position to put boundaries in place to restrict access to me, because I've got to get the work done. Or the example where you're like, well, my boundary is I need to go and pick up my kid from school. But actually, I know that there's a meeting at 5 o'clock and I'm going to miss it. And that's making me feel even more stressed and overwhelmed, because I feel like I should be there and I'm not. And so sometimes there's that balance.
Yes, I get that. But it does go back to, first of all, you always have to set your boundaries out at the very beginning. There's no point trying to, it's very hard to, when you've been somewhere suddenly, like for 3, 4, 5 years, suddenly saying, okay, I've got a new set of boundaries. That is hard to do that. And that's why it's really important at the beginning of a job.
Be consistent, lay them out and be consistent. And once you break them, then people know that they're breakable, and then you're done.
They're not non-negotiable. That means they're not non-negotiable. And also, you know, I just feel like that is so important. If they make you feel, if the company that you work for make you feel really uncomfortable, it goes back to the, do your values align anymore? Because it may have been that when you started with that company, they were fine with you leaving at a certain time or not being able to work certain times in the evening, you know, anything like that. It's been taken over. You know, the ethos of the company is different. And that is where that question comes back to, do your values align? You know, because
and that's so interesting. And so important, because that's true. It's like, if you're always made to feel guilty and that ends up sending you into a spiral of overwhelm, then actually there is that question of, is there an alignment here? Because it's making me feel ill and I never feel like I'm delivering. I used to work for a company where every time I had to go and pick up my daughter, I used to like pretend I was going to the toilet, or they'd be like, oh, see you on Friday, or see you next week, have a nice weekend on a Thursday. Like, it just didn't matter what I did. I always felt like stressed, and like I was never, even when I had my boundaries. And actually your point there of, well, are these the right people for you? In the end, they weren't. And actually there was just a misalignment. And so I think that's a really powerful thing for people to think about, which is which bit can you have an impact, which parts can you own, and like
and you know what, with the boundaries, I mean, it doesn't even need to be like, you know, if you're working, it's just in life in general. It's like, you know, if you go into relationships, it's anything in life. I feel like you need to have, you know, up to 4 just non-negotiables, where it kind of keeps you safe, because you lay it out in the beginning. This is me, this is who I am, this is what I need and expect. And if you can't expect that, it's like, do your values align with certain people? It's not always about the workplace, it's people as well. And that's how you get your people. It's how you get to know. It's all about, a lot of it's about self-respect, having the self-respect and the strength and the self-esteem to stick to those things, because you deserve them, because you need them.
I know, and I love it when I talk to you, because I mean, I've known you for a long time and you've always been big on this, and you're always like, you have to have the self-respect for yourself, for other people to respect you. And if you kind of give too much of yourself, or you let people treat you in a certain way, whether that's in a relationship or in a workplace, then that's on you. Because if you don't have that respect for yourself, then no one else is going to have it for you either. And you're so big on that, and you've always like, that's something that I've always heard from you. And like, it's just such a powerful message to give people. Like, if you don't respect yourself and your boundaries, then no one else will respect them either. So you have to put those in place and own that. And the other question,
it all starts with you. Everything starts with you, because you're in charge of you. There is no one else. You know, you're in charge of the thoughts that you listen to, the way that you respect yourself, the boundaries you give, the people that you mix with. Everything in your life is up to you. You know, you are in charge of you. You can't expect it from other people. And that's when we talk about boundaries, you know, and self-respect and self-esteem. It all starts with you, and no one else can do it for you. And if you can't do it for yourself, that's why people have coaches, etc. Because They need some
Yeah. So
guidance.
Ali, someone's just asked a question, which I'm really interested in the answer, and I'll give my view as well. But the question is, how do you find a job that aligns with your values,
Right.
especially now that the job market is so hard?
Okay.
Great question.
Yeah, it is a great question. But quite often, do you know what your values are? Because I feel like if you know what your values are, it shouldn't be so hard to find the job. If you almost have lost yourself and you don't know who you are anymore, yeah, it's a bit of a minefield. And it's really about taking that step back, just really thinking, reevaluating, who am I? What is it that I love? What is my passion? What would I enjoy going to every day? What would give me joy? Because let's be honest, life is short. We only live once. No one knows what's around the corner. You've got to be happy every day doing that job. So
Is
you
that
have to
naive
know.
though in a job market that's really tough and people need jobs? Is that naive to say, I mean, I'm not saying that we shouldn't, but in a tough job market and you need a job, yes, you want it to align with your values, but it's hard.
Yes, I get that. And that is where you can use some of your non-negotiables. So let's say you've only got a couple, you'll have to use some of those non-negotiables to find one. You may not be able to find the perfect job, but if you really know what your values are, if you truly know yourself and you truly know what lights you up and also what pisses you off, you'll be able to narrow it down. I'm not saying that every single one of us is going to have the perfect dream job, but you can narrow it down if you know yourself. You set out a couple of boundaries that are non-negotiable, and you have you know your value, then you will be able to narrow it down. Okay, you might not be able to get the perfect job, but you could certainly get rid of the definite no's. Okay,
So
because
that's
otherwise,
just, I think knowing your values comes more with age and experience, which I think is fair.
yeah, maybe. I think, maybe that is something, yeah, that is something we can think about. But, quite often when you're younger, you may not have a family and you might have more time and you are able to do more. I feel like when you get to a certain age and you are juggling all these balls in the air, then something has to give. And your boundaries and your values become absolutely so important, because why shouldn't they?
Yeah. So I agree. I'd also say to the person who asked, how can you find a job that aligns with your values? So what Ali's right, know what they are, so that you've got a start point. Because if you don't know what they are, then where are you going?
Impossible.
But also use the interview, and you use your interviews to get under the skin of the values of the company, the culture of the company, like ask questions. And if that doesn't feel like the right fit, then even though it is a tough job market and nothing is perfect, you don't really want to take a job somewhere that, unless you absolutely have to, obviously, and that's different, it doesn't align with who you are, because it won't make you happy. So I would say use the interview process to really try and get under the skin by asking questions like, what's the culture? Think about the things that are important to you. What are the values? And so it's not just all about the job. It's bigger than that, because it has to fit you. And if you're, so this person, it might just be corporate speak, but a lot of company websites have sections on values and ethos. They do, but a lot of companies talk about the values and ethos, but don't always walk the walk when it comes to it. So you have to have a really good connection with your line manager, with the person interviewing you, etc. What do you think, Elle?
Absolutely. And that's why I was saying it's quite important to see if there's a support group at the work, someone you can go to. But I also feel like, and it's really interesting, because I often think that when I look at some of these company websites and you see that, I feel like they're saying the right words, and they talk about mental health and they talk about mindset and all of this positive thinking, etc. But what are they actually doing? And it's up to you to find that out. What do they do to reinforce that? What is done? What do they say about that? Because then it will lead on to something, my last bit that I want to talk about, these buzzwords that we hear. But I know exactly whoever said that is coming from, and I do find that quite fascinating. And I feel like, because a lot of employees know that we're all becoming a bit more switched on now, and our mental health is a priority, they do have to talk about these things. But can they walk the walk? They can talk the talk, but can they walk the walk, or whichever way around it is? That's a really interesting question. And ultimately, we can have our boundaries, we have to know our values, but very importantly, you've got to be able to trust yourself. Okay. You've got to be able to listen to that little inner voice. It's never wrong. Okay, you've got to learn to trust yourself. You know when you may want it to be right. You may want, because it just fits in with everything else, but there's just something that's off, and you have to learn to trust yourself. Okay, so no, it's not easy. No, it's not straightforward, but there are some things that you can do to help yourself. And I think that
So
we wanted,
what
yeah, sorry, go on.
I was going to say, what else do you tell your clients, or if someone was feeling this, what do
Yeah,
you tell them to do, like maybe in their own time, to help them to work through some of these
yeah,
feelings?
yeah,
And do you think that burnout is something that you can work yourself back from? Because stress
yeah,
is quite different, but can you
yeah.
self manage burnout, or do you need to get help?
There's varying levels of degree, of burnout. And I think, when the only way out is out. If, you think to yourself, maybe it comes and goes, and maybe it comes in waves. And there's always things, that I tell my one-to-one clients that they can do to help themselves. And the problem with some of these things is we hear them so much, these buzzwords, but we don't really know what they are. So, for example, journaling. Journaling is, I always say to my clients, when do you have a spare 10 minutes? All I need is 10 minutes. And invariably they'll say at night, fine. 5 minutes of journaling. And when I say journaling, I mean just get an exercise book, a notebook, and anything, all the thoughts that are jumbled up and shouting at you up here, write them down. It does not matter if they make no sense, because no one's looking at it except you. Okay, so free up some of the thoughts, free up some space here, and put it down here. And what's really interesting about that is that you might want to look back at that in 1, 2, 3, 4 weeks' time to see how you were feeling, because something may have been going on at that time, and you'll understand what your triggers are. So it's a really good way of having some sort of reference, but it frees up some thoughts. And then the next 5 minutes, I usually give my clients a personalized meditation. So if they feel like they've got a lack of self-esteem, they want more self-confidence, they can't relax, they can't fall asleep, whatever it is, I do a personalized meditation, and it's done to a particular type of music that people might be interested in. I don't know if you've ever heard of something called binaural beats, if you know what that is. And
I
it
don't.
is to make it very basic, it puts your brain into a theta state. So you have your brain waves that are what's called a theta state, and that's what they are when you are probably, a newborn to the age of 6 or 7, and it enables you to take in everything going around you, makes you far more susceptible. And so this particular music is done to the meditation, and it really helps you to relax, listen to everything I'm saying. It's 2 slightly different sound waves in each ear that you aren't aware of. It just sounds like lovely music. That is what's going on. So I say to my clients, 5 minutes of journaling, 5 minutes of meditation, you'll go to bed far more positive than you normally would. Exercise. And I know people will be like, oh, boring. But when you're doing exercise, and I think maybe not even so much going to the gym, because I think when you go to the gym, you're still doing it on your own and you can still have that overthinking. I often say to clients, group sport, netball, hockey, whatever it might be, try and do a group thing, because you might not look forward to going. And the first 2 minutes, you might be still overthinking, but then you get really into what you're doing. And then an hour's over and you think, oh my gosh, I didn't think about anything for like an hour. And it's so refreshing, isn't it? When you can step away from your problems, where you haven't thought about it.
And
It's
all
like
the
a break.
endorphins as well that just release
Absolutely.
in your body.
Positive endorphins. Another really big thing, and I think people also are a bit like, oh gosh, is gratitude work. And I don't know if it's something if you ever practice it or you ever do it. It is such a positive way to start the morning, even if it's just 30 seconds whilst you're making your coffee. It makes such a massive difference about the way that you feel about yourself. It decreases stress hormones straight away. Okay. And long term, it actually leads to lasting changes in the brain when you
What does
practice
gratitude
gratitude.
mean? What does
You're
that mean?
great. You're grateful. So rather than thinking starting your day in that negative frame of mind, thinking about, oh, I've got to do this and I've got to do that. Oh my God. And I, like all of, very negative way of thinking. Isn't it lovely to start the day thinking 30 seconds or 1 minute? I am so grateful that I've got A, B, C, whatever it is. Like, I'm really lucky, and I really feel lucky
in
that
the
I've got
moment
that.
of all the things that you are grateful for, not all
the
the things
that
that
you
you're always
hate.
worrying about and make you stressed.
Yes.
Like, actively, what am I grateful for?
Flip it on its head. So, I'd often say to people, do up to 1 minute of that in the morning. And then if you've got 10 minutes, and most people do have 10 minutes in the evening, 5 minutes getting your thoughts down on paper, doesn't matter if they're loads of jumbled rubbish, doesn't matter, it frees space, a little bit of meditation, just doing those things. Let's start focusing on things that we can do to ourselves that are positive. And a really big thing is just share your feelings, whoever it might be with, a trusted friend, anyone that you can trust. Share your feelings. Don't keep it all in, because it's such an awful, lonely way to be alone with your thoughts day and night, with the same thoughts going round and round your head. It's not a way to live. And it's such relief to be able to let it out to someone that you trust. So that is the advice. And I know that there's a lot of information there. And I'm more than happy for anyone, if they want to message me, for some more advice, that's fine, because that's what I love to do. I love to help, I really do. And there's so much we can do for ourselves. It's just flipping it on its head and thinking about things in a different way.
Amazing. All right. Well, look, we've way run over, but I really love the session, and I feel it's fine. We've still got quite a few people listening, so
okay,
I'm hoping they found it really useful. I could chat about this all day, but there's so many things that you've given us tonight. Actually, we've done a whistle-stop tour, but just things that I've heard are, and some of them are buzzwords, and I hear them like, what does gratitude mean, and what does journaling mean? But like, what you're saying is just basically they are buzzwords, but actually turn it on its head. Be grateful for the things, like, instead of being negative, like, try and turn things into a positive.
Just try it. Just try. It's a few minutes.
Getting your thoughts out of your head, stepping back from the situation. Like, there's so much that you've gone through tonight. We've got really lovely feedback. Thanks for a great session, wonderful, helpful talk. Really pleased I joined. So I'm hoping that people got really good value out of this. I really love doing this. I think we should do a few more sessions, because I know that there's so many different areas that you talk about. If people want to get hold of you, Ali, I know that you're on Instagram. What's your
Ali Olins Life Coach on Instagram. And please, get in touch. Any questions that you've got, I love to help people. That is what I love to do. And if you go to my Instagram, you'll get an idea of the kind of topics I cover. There's loads of reels and stories and information. A lot of it's about anxiety, self-esteem, self-love, confidence. It goes, in that area, talking about boundary setting. These are the kind of things that I talk about. But I'm more than happy, always happy to help, happy to come on here. If there's any topics people, really want to cover, I'm more than happy, and I've really enjoyed it.
And if anyone wants to work with you one-to-one, should they just contact you? You do corporate, but also one-to-one.
Absolutely. I do. I do corporate. I do. As I said earlier, I do corporate where, the life coaching is outsourced to me. But I do have one-to-ones, and I have all different things, different programs. It could be 6 weeks, 12 weeks. I do some 4-week ones, and actually also do 90-minute sessions. So what I normally do, if someone gets in touch with me, we normally have like a free discovery call, and we'll have a chat to see, what the issue is, what they need some help with. And then that will give me an idea of how long we kind of need to work together. So there's all different things, all different budgets, is available. And I'm more than happy to speak to somebody and, to have a chat to see where I can help. And it can be so life, I love changing people's lives, and because that's what it does. And, it's such a pleasure to be able to do it.
All right. Well, look, I've loved talking to you tonight, and we'll be back in the group session soon. I hope everyone finds that really useful. Thanks so much, Ali, and have a good night, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.